Please get ready for a dictation of transcription number 394 and 395 from Sir Kailash Chandra magazine. 5 seconds. Start. Sir, I rise to support the demands for grants of the Ministry of External Affairs and their report submitted to this House. As the Honourable Minister of State for External Affairs, Shri Natwar Singh, said yesterday, the test of a national policy is that it has a national consensus behind it. Even when there was a change of government and a new government came into being after the Congress party's defeat in 1977, the nation stuck to the same policy with regard to foreign affairs. When somebody pointed out to Shri Vajpayee, the then Minister for External Affairs, that his role and his speeches as a Jan Sangh leader were contradictory to his role and his speeches as the Foreign Minister of India, he replied that he was concerned with the foreign policy of the Government of India and not with the foreign policy of the Jan Sangh. So that shows that the foreign policy of India, based on a national consensus, had emerged as an important concept for the nation to follow, and that it did not undergo any change even when the complexion of the government changed. India is one of the very few parliamentary democracies where there is a strong national consensus behind its foreign policy because it is based on sound principles of non-alignment, Panchsheel, and similar other concepts which were outlined even before our independence. It is a tribute to the vision and genius of the leaders of our national struggle that the Asian Relations Conference was held before India attained independence, that India became a member of the United Nations. We are one of the founding fathers of that institution. During the year under review, a noticeable change has taken place, and it is a welcome change. The focus has changed to Asia. We have taken due note of the Asian dimension in the evolution of our foreign policy. Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi's stopover in Tokyo during his visit to Canada to participate in the Commonwealth Heads of Governments Conference was the first sign of this, and the recent visit of the Prime Minister to Japan has strengthened the impression that we are not forgetting the Asian dimension in our foreign policy formulations. The commemorative Asian Foreign Relations Conference held last year, and the talks between our government and the Foreign Minister of Japan were also significant developments in this connection. What I want to emphasize is that one of the historical distortions that came into our foreign policy in the initial stages was that we were being exposed to the Western influences for a pretty long time. We were more oriented towards the West, and as a result, the cultural linkages between the Asian countries, China, Japan, Indonesia, and Southeast Asia were not explored and exploited to the extent to which they should have been from the very beginning. So even in the United Nations, Japanese is regarded as a hard language, but we should provide for and we should have some sort of scope for greater and more frequent cultural exchanges between Asian countries on the one hand and India on the other. At this moment, we are more oriented towards the West in our literature, in our culture. But basically our roots are with countries in Asia, with Japan, with Sri Lanka, with China, with Indonesia. So setting up of the departments for Japanese and Chinese studies in Delhi University was a step in the right direction. I would plead with the Minister of State for External Affairs that this movement to bring Asia into focus in our universities, in our diplomatic relations, in our adventures is given a greater push, and we are able to take into account the developments in Asia more vigorously and more seriously than has been the case hitherto. As regards China, I am of the opinion that the efforts of the Government of India to normalize her relations should be hailed by that country because we are bound by traditions of cultural affinity. And now the times are changing. China of today is not the same China which was prior to 1979 when USA also recognized China, though India was primarily responsible for pleading their case for admission to the UN. China is undergoing vast changes and there are talks now of Sino-Soviet summit, though there are some defects also, but this shows that the winds of change are blowing. China has also put 3 conditions for such a summit. One of the conditions is almost fulfilled, that is withdrawal of the Soviet troops from Afghanistan. The second was the reduction in the presence of Soviet armies on the border with China, and the third is the withdrawal of Vietnam forces from Kampuchea. In this connection, I would suggest to the Honorable Minister for External Affairs that the Indian initiative for solving the Kampuchean problem is also taken up with renewed vigor, because once this problem is sorted out, we will have lesser tension in Asia. Mr. Chairman, sir, agriculture is the main profession of our country. Many people, especially people in the rural areas, are dependent on agriculture and other subsidiary industries. Many farmers follow the traditional method of cultivation and they depend on rain completely. After independence, the 5-year plans have brought some changes in the method of cultivation. Our late Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru had said that we should treat the irrigation projects as temples. This was the faith that our late Pandit Nehru had in the irrigation projects, and we should follow his footsteps if we are really interested in the welfare of our farmers. The farmer wants to be self-sufficient and is content with minimum needs. Scientific developments and implementation of 5-year plans have helped to modify the method of cultivation. Farmers are benefited by the various agricultural research centers set up in the country. These days, the processed seeds are supplied to the farmers. Animal husbandry is an integrated part of agriculture. Animal husbandry can flourish only when the forests are protected. Sufficient quantity of cattle feed should be available. Unfortunately, the forest area is decreasing day by day, and this has to be checked. There are sufficient discussions in this house and outside the house about fertilizers and subsidy. There is a feeling that the agricultural produce would be more nutritious if it is grown using chemical fertilizers. Of course, the use of chemical fertilizers has resulted in the increase of agricultural produce. The use of manure in agriculture is on the decrease. The youth are migrating from villages to urban areas. Job opportunities, entertainment, etc. available in cities have attracted the village youth. Our government should take immediate steps to check this migration and to help the agriculturists. Therefore, animal husbandry, poultry, sheep rearing, sericulture and other subsidiaries of agriculture have to be encouraged. Then only the farmers can become self-sufficient and agricultural production can increase. We can earn more foreign exchange if we increase the production of silk. The government should also encourage the use of compost manure. Compost manure is produced by putting cow dung, sheep dung, and green leaves into pits. This compost manure is much better than chemical fertilizers, but unfortunately, the use of compost manure is becoming unpopular in our country. The number of farmers using compost manure is decreasing every day. At present, the backbone of the farmer is being broken. The center has to come forward to help the farmers. There should be new programs to liberate the farmers from the clutches of debt. The 8th 5-year plan is before us. In this plan, prominence should be given to irrigation and production of electricity. In my state, there is no considerable increase in the generation of electricity for the last 10 years. There is no increase in the area of irrigated land also. The electricity produced in the thermal power plants and hydro power plants would be exhausted very shortly. Agriculture should be made a compulsory subject in our educational institutions. Many students, after their school education, would lose interest regarding land, water, soil, etc. Hence, topics on agriculture must be included in the syllabus of our schools. Today, the paradox is that some students imagine ragi plant as tree and coconut tree as a plant. Hence, to avoid such ignominy, we should make it a point to set up technical training centers through agricultural universities. We can increase export of food grains and earn valuable foreign exchange. Each farmer cannot take up this responsibility on his own. Hence, the center should take initiative in this direction and assist farmers in all possible ways to boost agricultural production. At the same time, the center should see that middlemen don't exploit the farmers. Marketing facilities should be available to the growers of cotton, silk, etc. Raw material should be readily available for processing. Storage facilities should also be there. Irrigation must be given priority. Agriculture is a vast field, and many of my colleagues have expressed their views on this subject. Water is life of farmers. Hence, every drop of water should be stored and utilized properly. Throughout the country, bore wells have been provided and the water level is going down. Therefore, digging of tank is very essential to store and recharge water. Desilting and minor irrigation works should get priority. At present, we are importing oil seeds. I feel ashamed to talk about this import of oil seeds. Our land is fertile and most of our people are agriculturists. Why can't we grow sufficient quantity of oil seeds like sunflower seeds, groundnut seeds, etc.? Our late lamented leader, Shrimati Indira Gandhi, the then Prime Minister, gave us the 20-point program. Unfortunately, this program has not been implemented in all the states. Stop.